SSERAFIM just dropped their new EP, Crazier. But what's up with the backup dancers? And why are they goldfish? Let's talk about it. Chapter 1. Juicy. I must acknowledge a bit of amusement at the way that 100% of the members kind of butchered the pronunciation of "all my girls are girling girling."
All the girls are girling girling. All the girls are girling girling. All the girls are girling girling. All the girly girls.
Although it's hard to fault them because the RLS consonant trifecta doesn't exist in Korean, as it doesn't distinguish between the R and L phonemes, let alone place them adjacent to one another. When I first heard the lyrics for the song and I heard the "all my girls are girling girling," I was like, oh no, this is going to be another cultural appropriation nightmare. But in fact, the Source Music people really went out of their way to include members of the community that they are borrowing aesthetics from. The concept for this release is based on ballroom dancing. No, not that kind of ballroom dancing. The kind of ballroom dancing that was popularized by queer urban POC communities in the 70s. Don't forget, gay rights are not a big thing in Korea. In fact, they're kind of far behind the 8-ball. So, in that respect, they were kind of making a bit of a crazy choice. The backup dancers in SSERAFIM's video are actually from the House of Juicy Couture. The House of Juicy Couture is one of 3 existing iconic Hall of Fame Kiki houses, and it's been in operation for 15 years. It certainly couldn't have been cheap for Source Music to fly them all out to be part of this video, and it's really appropriate that they included them. And also, while the choreography that SSERAFIM is doing is inspired by Vogue, actually most of the voguing is done by the Juicy Couture members themselves, which I think was a great way to be respectful to that scene. Voguing is a difficult style of dancing that people train in for years. Chapter 2. Promotions. I think that Crazier is pretty much exactly what SSERAFIM needed right now. It returns to the dance style that was very successful with Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's Wife, and much like Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's Wife, they are going hard on the promotions for this one. But they're doing so in a mindful way, and I really think that they've been very successful. Most importantly, they picked a song that was within a vocal range of the performers, and you can really tell because they've been going all out to sing live during their stage shows so far. And they've been doing so very successfully. They've already dropped several remixes, both of which have very cool music videos. One of the remixes, the Vogue remix, is by Deshaun Wesley, who's a very prominent performer within the ballroom scene. Featuring him was a great idea. I think it's really cool that they gave him a platform to showcase his music and the ballroom style. They also released another remix with Pink Pantheress, and I really think that her verses add something to the song. So that's also worth checking out. It also has a really cool visualizer video, which I very much enjoyed. They also released an English version already, which, especially given the queer nature of this comeback, I have to admit the first thing that came to mind when I saw the music video was,
"Go back to Party City where you belong."
I don't really watch Drag Race anymore, but some of the references are just too iconic to ever forget. Chapter 3. Goldfish. So what's up with all the goldfish symbolism, though? They definitely featured them in the Chasing Lightning trailer that preceded Crazier, and they're also obviously featured within the music video. We see the outline of one escaping from Eugen's brain. Goldfish aren't necessarily well-renowned for having particularly big brains, and so it's kind of implying that Eugen isn't that bright, which I'm sure that that's not what they meant by it. I think that the aquarium metaphor is really interesting because it implies that SSERAFIM is being viewed from outside under a bit of a microscope. The fish inside the aquarium don't have any ability to affect what's going on outside of them. Essentially, they're kind of like prisoners. I think that it's an apt metaphor given all of the trouble that SSERAFIM has been getting with outside criticism recently. Goldfish also grow to the size of their container, and so if you put them in a very small container, such as a cup, they're not going to stay very big. But if you put them in a giant aquarium, they can really go to be much larger. Not to mention, if you left a goldfish in a cup like that, it's probably going to die pretty quickly. Chapter 4. Galileo. Galileo is considered the father of modern physics. SSERAFIM specifically references Galileo in the beginning of both of the pre-choruses, and when they do, they show a statue of him holding a radio antenna. They also mention being on trial every day. This is very appropriate. Galileo was placed on trial for advocating for heliocentrism, or rather the notion that we revolve around the sun rather than vice versa. That was considered heresy at the time because it contradicted the Bible. Everyone thought he was crazy, even though he very much was not. Chapter 5. B-sides. I do also want to take a moment to talk about the B-sides that accompany the Crazy EP, which overall I think are pretty strong. I'm so happy to see that Pierrot finally features Yoonjin's opera skills, and she sounds so good. I was also really a big fan of 1-800 Hot and Fun. In fact, I kind of hope that that one gets a music video a little bit further down the road because I feel like it has a lot of potential. That said, I do think that if they had chosen 1-800 Hot and Fun as the title track, they might have gotten some backlash for it being in all English. I think it's also interesting how they juxtapose the premise of lightning with the water. Obviously, those two things are pretty incompatible, and if you were to get hit by lightning while you're in water, you're probably not going to have very good outcomes. I'm not going to lie, I'm not the hugest fan of Crazier, just because I generally don't like ballads very much, and also the title of the song is a wee bit misleading. Doesn't sound very crazier to me, frankly. But I appreciate that they let Yoonjin produce, and I think it was smart for them to include a song where they get to show off their vocal chops a little bit more. So even though it seems kind of out of place with the album, I do respect that they included it. Chapter 6, Verdict. Overall, I think that this was a really strong comeback. I don't know if it's necessarily going to top Anti-Fragile for me in terms of being my favorite song from them, but I do think it's really strong. It's super catchy. I've already listened to it dozens of times since it came out, not just to create this video. In fact, I actually started recording a SSERAFIM tier list this week, but then I had so many things to say about this video that I decided I wanted to create something separate for it. I do still want to create that tier list eventually, but there was just too much that I had to say, and I wanted to be able to discuss the B-sides. My one biggest gripe with this comeback is I really wish they would have tried a little bit harder on the costuming. How are you going to create a chorus that says, act like an angel and dress like crazy, and then put them in clothes that look like they just came off of a frat boy's floor? Like Yoonjin with the polo shirt and the basketball shorts and the loafers. I mean, I guess it's crazy, but I would have really preferred to see them do something more along the lines of what XG does with their fashion, where they don't necessarily lean into generic clothes and they go with more custom fashion. Also, these outfits that they're doing with the white shirts and the jeans and the hats are about as safe as humanly possible. Like, I get that they're Y2K. The fact that they were featured with the chorus just doesn't necessarily make sense to me. I'm also really glad they dyed Sakura's hair ash blonde this time. It is so much more flattering than the untoned yellow I bitched about a few weeks ago. I do also really appreciate that the choreographers went out of their way to include breaks for the performers. That big, long 8 bars or so that they get to stand there and point for a second is an opportunity for them to catch their breath, which will help them a lot during their live performances. I think overall I'll give this an 8 out of 10. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't seen my SSERAFIM Makes It Look Hard video yet, why not go watch that one next? Don't be toxic, and I'll catch you next time.